Welcome into Sideline Signal. I'm Andrew, as always, joined by my wonderful co-host Tyler. We finally got to the end of the Senior Bowl, which is obviously a week-long bowl where the finest seniors in college football get to show out and show their talents for, hopeful prospects and hopeful NFL scouts. It was an interesting week, a lot to talk about. Obviously, we had drills throughout the week, and then on the weekend, the big game. But yeah, without further ado, we are going to go through our three biggest winners and our three biggest losers from the Senior Bowl. How are you doing today, Tyler?
I am good. It is NFL draft season. Have officially closed on the college football season. Obviously, the Senior Bowl marks that. A lot of people helped their case for the draft. A lot of people hurt their case for the draft. So we'll be going over that. A lot of guys that are making a name for themselves, maybe jumping from a day three to a day two pick, or even day two to day one. So a lot of people to talk about. So I'm excited. I'm
Yeah,
excited, definitely.
I'm excited too. And so without further ado, let's just get right into it. Tyler, who were one of your biggest winners of the Senior Bowl week?
So I actually picked two wide receivers, two very different players, but I'm going to start with the one that made plays in the slot. That will be Jalen Noel from Iowa State. He may be 5'9". He's only about 170 pounds, but he absolutely cooked in one-on-ones all week. Also had a great game for himself. He was recognized as the best wideout on the national team, and his draft stock is definitely rising for someone that doesn't have a lot of size but kind of can create in space, similar to Alad McConkey, a bit smaller than him, but someone that can execute well without a lot of separation in those intermediate and slot type routes. So he played really well. And obviously, you love to see the crazy one on ones with the wide receivers and just their shiftiness. So he was great to watch all week. So he really helped his case as someone that may have not been on the top end of this receiving class. Obviously, we don't really know how it's going to shake out come draft day, but certainly helped himself this week in Mobile.
Yeah, and I'm gonna stick with the same trend that you went. I'm gonna go over my biggest wide receiver winner first. And obviously, Jalen Noel was a great pick. It was a guy I looked at. It's undisputed. He had a phenomenal weekend. I'm going with another guy, maybe undersized in a lot of scouts' eyes, but another great performance, especially in the drills. I'm going Tez Johnson from Oregon. And like I said, going into it, when they were doing the measurables, a little concerning. He came in at 5'9", around 160, 165 pounds, but he really showed no signs of struggle this week. Looking at the reps that he had in both one-on-ones and seven-on-sevens, he was unstoppable. He was going against, some of the top senior DBs. I'm blanking on his name, but he had a lot of one-on-ones against the Florida State DB who, he's supposed to be a highly touted prospect, and he was unstoppable. I mean, it's clear that his speed and his footwork are at the top of the game for, NFL level college recruits. So obviously being an Oregon fan, I saw that throughout the season. He had an incredible season, barring his, 4 to 5 week injury that he has sustained mid-season. But yeah, Tez Johnson definitely stood out. I saw a lot of media talking about how good his performance was. He's definitely going to rise in his stock. It's difficult because there are a lot of really good receivers this year, but I could definitely see him potentially being an early day two, maybe even now a late day one kind of pickup, kind of like the Xavier Worthy that we saw last year, going right at the end of the first round. But yeah, phenomenal. The 5'9", 160 did not show at all. He's going to be able to compete in the NFL. But yeah, Tez Johnson to me was one of the best receivers all week. Jalen Noel was another great one, but I'll let you get into it. Who's your second of your big winners this week?
So, also something else with Tez Johnson is that he is basically kind of like the adopted younger brother of Bo Nix as well. So, something to watch there, maybe meeting up in Denver come April. But with my second selection for my stock up, I'm going to flip the side of the ball, go defense here with edge Mike Green from Marshall. A guy that led the FBS in sacks. However, I didn't know his name until this week. I think just about everyone who loves college football and the NFL saw the clip this week of his one-on-one against Oregon's Josh Connerly Jr. Absolutely just ran him over. Andrew will talk about that a little later, but it went viral on X. He flashed uh, quickly and then vanished. He didn't play in the game, but his one-on-ones and all of his drills, movement-wise, technique-wise, was amazing. He had 17 sacks and had 22.5 tackles for loss. So an amazing player, but obviously didn't play in the Power Five conferences. So a lot of people questioned how good his opponents actually were. But I think he has made a name for himself, and he could be someone that sneaks into maybe that early day two, possibly even day one kind of ranges as a game breaking edge rusher. So really impressive stuff from Mike Green.
Definitely. Phenomenal player. He had a lot of great reps. Obviously, it would have been nice to see him play in the game, but obviously he had a great weekend. I'll talk a little bit about Josh Connerly later, but I also went with an edge rusher. This is a guy, I think he already would have been a day one guy in my eyes, but looking at the edge rushers, before the Senior Bowl, it was kind of clear. Obviously, Abdul Carter is the top dog, but then it was who else follows him. And to me, my biggest winner on the defensive side of the ball definitely had to be Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher from Texas A&M. Obviously, he had a little bit of a disappointing season, kind of scheme-wise with A&M. I don't have the stats up in front of me, but I know it wasn't the season that he really wanted. But looking at the Senior Bowl, he was good at everything. Let me talk about his physical size too. He's 6'6", 290 pounds as an edge rusher. So he's got the build to be dominant in the league. He's not only great physically, but he's quick too. In those one-on-one drills against the offensive line, he really showed the flashes that he could be a brute force, but he could also just be the quick guy to get around a tackle. He was phenomenal in the one-on-ones. I graded him, I think 9 out of the 10 reps that he had were great. One of them was a little forgettable, but you can't expect perfection out of these guys. It depends on who you're going against, the rep, a lot of factors. But yeah, 9 out of the 10, I was blown away from him. And I think one of the biggest things that I enjoyed while watching him throughout this weekend was definitely how quick his hands were in those passing, in the passing pressure drills. He's got really quick hands, which you wouldn't really expect with a guy of that size. But like I said, his speed is very very underrated in my book. I could easily see him being like a middle first round. I had him as a late first round going into the Senior Bowl, but like I said, middle first round, I could definitely see Shamar Stewart going. Like I said, Mike Green was great, but you talk about a guy who can get it done in the Power Five too. Obviously, that doesn't matter once you get to the league, but a Power Five guy that really stood out, and I was just blown away by him.
And it'll be interesting to see where he matches up also with another guy from Texas A&M, Nick Scruton, going to be at the top of this kind of class at the edge rusher. But that just shows you how good the defensive line for the Aggies was this year. But certainly an impressive week for Stewart there. Getting to my final stock up, my second wide receiver that I've selected, and just an all out, just kind of the bell of the ball at the Senior Bowl this week. What a week for him. And that is going to be Jack Beck uh, from TCU. It's just been an emotional week for him and his family. He ends up winning the MVP. Super impressive week. Catches the game-winning touchdown for the American team, all at the same time as all the players all week. And just the game in general has been in honor of his older brother Tiger, who obviously tragically passed away just about a month ago. But just so many emotions for him, and to be able to fight through that, to be able to give all these interviews, because I know that he was being confronted with media, and just to go in and day out and be impressive. He was one of the best in terms of 50-50 balls downfield, just being physically gifted when the ball's in the air, being a vertical threat is what he's best at. And he is someone that has made a name for himself going into this draft. He's done great things. I want to see what he does at the combine, where he stacks up next to like McMillan or something like that, if McMillan even runs or anything. But he is someone that had a lot to gain going into this week, and he certainly shot up draft boards for a lot of teams, I'm sure. But just a great week for him, and I'm very happy that it's happening to someone like him, going through just all this emotional turmoil to have something good and positive happen, which is awesome for him and his family.
Yeah, definitely the feel good story of the Senior Bowl. It was great to see him have a great week and obviously getting the game winning touchdown. I mean, what can be better than that? Yeah, definitely a tragic story, but it was good to see a great performance out of him and not be kind of taken back by all the media who were constantly kind of asking about it. But yeah, my final winner, I went with a guy who I see probably day three, maybe now a late day two guy. I'm going with Dan Jackson, the safety out of Georgia. And it wasn't necessarily that he was the best guy there, but he definitely in time showed me a lot of things to be impressed with. Where it might be a minor stock movement, but I was certainly impressed with him. He had really good pass recognition and his speed, his closing speed in pursuit was really impressive. He made a lot of waves on social media this week. There was a play in, I believe it was 7-on-7s, but it might have been tempo, where corner gets beat, safety, he's coming down over top, and he just lays out. I forget who the receiver was, but he lays out the receiver to stop a touchdown from happening. It made some waves. It was a clean hit. It wasn't anything kind of like, oh, but yeah, his speed really impressed me. Like I said, this is going to be a guy. He's not going to be a day one guy. Honestly, probably not a lot of people are going to talk about him, but he just made some solid plays both in the game and in reps. His speed was a lot more impressive than I thought it was going to be. His pass recognition was great. So I just thought, why not give a love to a guy that might be, later in the draft. So, but yeah, Dan Jackson, definitely a name I wouldn't bat my eyes at if you're a team that's needing a safety and pick him up late. But yeah, we've got our three winners down each. Let's move on to the losers. The unfortunate thing, because we love draft prospects. We love watching guys play. We
Yep.
want to see these guys go on to the next level and make a name for themselves and be the next great. But unfortunately, when you have winners, you have to have losers. There's guys, maybe they didn't stand out. Maybe they really struggled. We'll definitely get into quarterbacks each later. We'll kind of have a big discussion on that. But I'll let you go first. Who was a guy that just didn't stand out? Who would you have as a loser from this Senior Bowl?
So as you said, like obviously you don't want to have to talk about the negative things, but as you guys will see, Andrew and I are very, very skeptical as fans of teams that really can't draft. We are very over analytical and we really, really put a lot of passion into this. So I hate to say it, but Arian Smith is going to be my first stock down of the wide receiver from Georgia. We saw this in the game against Notre Dame, even his drops throughout the season. He could not catch the ball. He was brick hands all year. He had like three drops against Notre Dame that carried over. He had three drops on Wednesday alone. He had not a single catch, not a single target in the game. I don't blame you, honestly, for not playing him this week, just simply because he hasn't been able to catch the ball. It hasn't mattered if it's right on his chest or even an acrobatic catch. Like, he cannot do anything right now. I wonder if it's in his head, like what's going on with him mentally. But it's hard to gain trust as a young player, especially a wide receiver, trying to break into this league if you cannot catch the football. Hopefully someone takes a chance on him, but I don't really see where he can help himself anymore, just simply because he blew this chance as someone that isn't a top wide receiver prospect that might not get an invite to the combine. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up.
Yeah, he definitely disappointed me this season. So hopefully for his sake, he's able to get it figured out. I would like to see him at the combine because I want to see him kind of make up for it and prove that he's, capable of competing in the NFL. But yeah, definitely disappointing weekend from him. I went with kind of a similar guy, but in a different position. I went with Ollie Gordon. They were obviously, running back from Oklahoma State, and he was kind of coming off that disappointing season. He was a preseason Heisman contender, and obviously we all know what happened with Oklahoma State. They didn't win a single conference game, only wins 3 games. He struggled immensely this season. Was it all his fault? No, but he didn't really take himself to the next level in the season. So I was really hoping that he would, prove why he was a preseason Heisman favorite this weekend in the Senior Bowl. And we look at it, this is a very deep running back class. We've been talking about it a lot, and I'm sure everybody is, obviously you have your Ashton Genty, but you have about 20 guys that could be studs in the NFL. So, like I said, I really wanted to see Ollie Gordon take that jump and show why he deserved to be in that conversation. And he just didn't. He didn't stand out at all to me. Whether it be in the game, obviously he had the trick play for the touchdown, which was cool. But in terms of just running the ball, his vision when he gets the ball, his burst speed, it didn't stand out. His pass blocking's not that great either. And so, like I said, I really wanted to see him take the jump into the elite category, and he just didn't. He was kind of one of those guys where if somebody were to ask me, "Hey, how did Ollie Gordon do at the Senior Bowl?" He was just he was there. I mean, it wasn't like he was horrible because there was definitely some guys, and there's one, like I said, we'll talk about later, that really, really hurt their stock. But to me, Ollie Gordon, he had some good plays, but like so did everyone. He just didn't do anything. It was kind of he just showed up, and it just there wasn't a wow factor. Like I said, he didn't make the jump like I expected him to. In a running back class this deep, you can't show up and just have a disappointing week. So I really see his stock dropping. I think there's some guys that might be hidden gems that might start to rise up above him in the draft boards. But yeah, Ollie Gordon was very disappointing outside of that trick play he had in the game.
Yeah, and honestly, to speak to someone that did the opposite of what you were saying, Donovan Edwards, really bad year for Michigan. On the cover of College Football 25, was expected to take over the mantle from Blake Corum and be that next big Michigan running back. Really did nothing. Honestly, got passed up at multiple points during the season, but he actually showed, uh, a lot of positives this week or this past week in Mobile as a receiver. And I've actually heard some rumors just looking at Twitter on social media that he might transition to wide receiver to be able to make a roster or get picked. And that is something that Ollie Gordon needs to realize is like, if you're going to be the one cut back that he is, you have to be the best at that. But it doesn't really that you can't be because Ashton Genty is already there. So like for Ollie Gordon, it's really maybe you're just out of luck here because we're in a draft, like you said, that has a running back class that is deep enough that almost every team can pick a running back probably and get a pretty good prospect. I know that was a little tangent there, but the point is, Ollie Gordon, you gotta impress at the combine. For my second stock down is going to be a guy that's similar. I had a lot of high expectations going into this week that kind of disappointed. Is going to be the tight end from Bowling Green, Harold Fannin Jr. When you think about the tight ends in this draft class, obviously Tyler Warren's going to be number one. Then you got Colson Loveland from Michigan, maybe Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame, and then this guy, Harold Fannin, who had a historic season at Bowling Green. He could not be stopped except for injury. Torched Penn State, kept them in that game. They almost went into Happy Valley and came out with the W. The expectations were super high for him coming in, but unfortunately, he didn't stand out. He didn't do anything amazing. He didn't do anything even great. It was just good. Not really what you're looking for from a guy that went to a small school and didn't really play against many great opponents going into kind of the combine season and right before the draft. He only weighs 238 pounds. So to be someone that has to be really good at catching the football or running routes, he didn't really do that, which is somewhere where you need to stand out at that size. Blocking, really struggled in blocking in the run game, also in pass protection. So if you're not going to do anything, amazing, you can't really stand out. I would only assume that his draft stock is going down and maybe he's getting passed up by some of these other tight ends. I hope to see him kind of get that chance at the next level because I think he can be an ultimate weapon, similar to like a Vernon Davis. That's kind of what I see in him, someone that you could see hurdling guys, but also being able to lower their shoulder and make almost every catch on the field. So for Harold Fannin, he's got to pick it up as well. I hope that he didn't really like that he's able to kind of expunge the stain on his record going into the combine.
Yeah, he's a guy this week that's really kind of had an asterisk around his name because it was weird because obviously I watched. I tend to agree with you. He disappointed me because he kind of much like Ollie Gordon was just kind of there, but a lot of people also had him as a winner in this Senior Bowl. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of confused right now with Harold Fanning. I'm very curious as we get to the combine and as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft if we can kind of as a collective as a community in terms of people who love scouting and making mock drafts if we can kind of understand him better because I think right now we're kind of at a standstill. Nobody's really sure, you know. Obviously, we saw what we saw from his time at Bowling Green, but how is that going to translate? Like I said, it's been a confusing kind of last few days with how people are perceiving him. So I think that's going to be really interesting moving forward. Um, Transitioning now, another one of my losers. You kind of talked about it a little with Mike Green, but I'm going with Josh Connerly Jr., the offensive tackle from Oregon. Now, in season, he was an All-American. I think he was All-American third team. So, you know, phenomenal season at right tackle for Oregon. He was a guy that had a big impact and was one of the reasons why Dylan Gabriel was able to be so successful. But he did not have a good week for me. Again, he's not at the bottom of the list for offensive tackles. I think there was a lot of the smaller school offensive linemen just as a whole, whether it be a guard or a tackle that struggled, but he looked slow in one-on-ones. Obviously, we saw him get completely bull rushed by Mike Green, which you have to consider that. Obviously, it's one rep, but that did not look good. And obviously, Mike Green will get drafted. He'll be an NFL guy, but if he can do that, who's to say any of the top D linemen in the NFL right now? Like you're telling me that Myles Garrett won't be able to do that to him? That's a concern. And like I said, when he was dropping sets into the pass pro, he looked slow. His hands are good. His hands have always been good, but his dropbacks are slow, and that's a concern for me. Obviously, All American. We know what we're getting out of him. He's a big physical tackle. He can be quick. That's the thing that confused me is he was pretty quick in his time at Oregon. The only game where he really struggled was the Rose Bowl against Ohio State, where their D line just babied them. But that's not all on him. But yeah, coming into the Senior Bowl, I mean, you got to show out. It's the same when you go to the combine. You have to put your best foot forward, and he didn't. He looked sluggish, and that's really disappointing. Pairing with him just completely obliterated. I mean, that's what people are going to think of Josh Connerly going up into the draft, unless he finds a way to prove it differently. But definitely a stock dropper for me. It's not like a major one. I still think he'll be a day two guy, but it was a little shocking, I'll say. I did not enjoy that performance at all, but it's one weekend. He hopefully will find a way to kind of cater around that and find a way to give people another reason to think about him other than that one rep. But now moving to our last loser, we kind of talked a little before we started recording. We had both had at least one quarterback as our loser, but I had put every quarterback, so I think it's fair to say the biggest stock riser from the Senior Bowl had to have been Quinn Ewers, and he wasn't there. Out of all the quarterbacks in attendance, none of them were that great. I'll let you get a little bit of a spiel in a second, Tyler, but what a disappointing week from all of the quarterbacks. Obviously Cam Ward and Shadur were not there. They were at, I think it was the Shrine Bowl. Uh,
Yeah.
they had both pretty solid performances, but looking at the guys who were at the Senior Bowl, there wasn't one specifically, at least in my opinion, that really said, okay, this guy's going to be a threat in the NFL. Jackson Dart, in my opinion, probably had the best week. Gabriel had a pretty solid week too, but again, you're looking for them to take that jump to be the leader of the pack, the guy that really set themselves apart from everyone else. And I personally don't think anybody did that. What did you think about the quarterback play from this Senior Bowl?
It didn't impress me. And to be honest, I was one of those people that thought that Jackson Dart could sneak into like the top five picks in this draft. I'm a Giants fan. I'm looking through my options, and I sincerely thought that Jackson Dart was in that same echelon. I'm not so sure now. These quarterbacks, none of them did anything to really help themselves. Like you said, Jackson Dart probably had the best week because he was the most consistent, but even then, he was mid. In terms of someone that lost a lot, it's Jalen Milroe. His throws were bad. They were laser beams, but they were inaccurate. He had trouble holding on to the ball, even catching the snap at times. Looked really bad. Andrew told me that during practice there was a snap where he dropped it, picked it up, and then proceeded to throw an interception. So that's not obviously very good for them. And even against air, he didn't look very good. In game, there were a lot of like last second checkdowns. It felt like the gears were turning in his head. It wasn't very fluid. Like after his first read, he wasn't really sure where to go with the ball, which is something that you can't have in the NFL. It's quick. It's quick. It's quick. You have to be able to go through at least like three or four reads of play if they're not open. Not everything's going to be open right away. But to be honest, I saw that across the board as well. Seth Hennigan, a little slow processing his reads. Riley Leonard, I saw him. He had one good throw. It was a slant. He fit it in a window that was like literally this size on third down, which is really nice. That's a throw that we've seen him make, but otherwise, nothing really. Dylan Gabriel had that really fast throw. He was efficient at times, but nothing that really elevated him. Taylor Elgersma from the University of London. I hope I didn't butcher that name from Canada. Pushed himself into the conversation, but didn't separate himself. Kind of had me sitting there like, why would I take this guy over these other guys that I actually know and have watched film on because they kind of seem like they're the same. Will Howard, I didn't even know he was there, to be completely honest with you. Going through it, I didn't really see many reps of him. And then Tyler Shutt, nothing impressive as well. A guy that kind of bounced around that is looking to be a career backup. Didn't impress. So, yeah, no, nothing impressed me. That's really all I got to say. I know I took a roundabout way of saying it, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I tend to love about evaluating quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl is you take them out of their system. Obviously, a lot of these top guys, like a guy like Jalen Milroe, who, yes, he was awful this week, but he's in a system that's all 5 stars and just studs. Obviously, this was a more disappointing year out of Alabama than we typically see, but you're taking them out of a system that they're comfortable in, that they have all these high-powered weapons. And yes, obviously, if you're at the Senior Bowl, you're a good talent, but it's something new you get to see because that's the closest thing to evaluating them transitioning into the NFL. You're going to be in a completely new system, different level of players. How can you handle it? And like you said, none of them stood out. Dart was semi-consistent, but even there were still a lot of doubts that I had with him, and it's concerning. I mean, you and I are both looking to April and potentially seeing quarterbacks taken for our teams, the Giants and the Raiders, depending on free agency. But if we're not trading up, I mean, you're in a better position than the Raiders are. But if you're not in the Shadur or Cam Ward sweepstakes, I'd be concerned. All of these guys have their flaws, and I want to speak about Jalen Milroe for a second. You brought it up, but his ability
Yeah.
in tempo was horrible. You brought it up, but yes, it's the first. I mean, yes, it's his first rep, so you got to get some of the butterflies out. But you're fumbling the snap. You get pressure off the edge. You try to roll out, and then like you make a last second read on a tight end. I believe it was a tight end running up the seam. Completely shrug off the linebacker who's covering him and throw. They blow the play dead. You throw a laser right to the linebacker. This was a guy that I thought like 2, 3 weeks ago could potentially be picked at like 15th. I was a big guy not too long ago, right before the Senior Bowl. I had been saying it to you and all my friends at home. Hey, I think we could have a quarterback scare like we did last year. I think we could see a lot of quarterbacks go in the first round, just like the domino effect that we saw. I don't think so. I'll be honest. Dart might be a late first round, potentially, maybe an early second round. Most of these guys I could see going in the third. This from this, it's an overreaction because it's just off the Senior Bowl, and we still can take their body of work from their careers at their universities, and obviously we'll have to wait and see the combine too. But this reminds me of what was it, the 2022 NFL draft class? Where it's Kenny Pickett, it's Matt Corral, it's Malik Willis
Yeah.
where on paper they all had good careers and then just it doesn't translate and they were horrible in the NFL. I'm really concerned right now that this class, outside of Cam and Shadur, we could see a lot of busts in this class. And like I said, complete overreaction. But right now, if we have to react just based off the body of work from the Senior Bowl, I'm terrified of our quarterback options this year.
Yeah, and I'm just going to throw out this little comparison. I want to see what you think for Milrow specifically. We've been hammering in on him because there was the most kind of proof that he stunk up this week. Uh, my comparison to him is Colin Kaepernick, both the good and the bad version of Colin Kaepernick. I think he's similar to Colin Kaepernick. I think when Kaepernick was able to kind of spread the ball around, it wasn't necessarily that he was, well, I guess he was making plays left and right on that year where he was able to get to the Super Bowl. But other than that, he really struggled if there wasn't a guy that was wide open. And I think it's pretty similar to that. And I'd honestly say that Cap was more accurate than Milrow, which is saying something because Colin Kaepernick was not very accurate. What do you think? What do you think? Is that reasonable?
I think there's some weight to that argument. I think it's hard because I would say obviously Kaepernick was mobile, but I think that Jalen Milroe is a lot more mobile of a quarterback than Kaepernick was, and I think some of that just stems from the fact that the style of play in both the NFL and college football are different now, where Kaepernick could run, but he was still kind of forced to play more of a pocket passer. Where Milrow, I mean, he's getting given the green light, like, hey, if your options are shutting down and you have a lane to take a run, go for it. So I think there's a little bit, but I think it's hard right now to give player comparisons because he's got great athletic capabilities, but that mental side right now, his ability to recognize patterns and pick up on blitzes, pick up on who's, is it zone, isn't man, it's looking bleak right now. I don't even want to give him an NFL comp right now. All I can hope is that Milrow finds a way to shake it off for his pro day and his combine because right now, like he was a guy, like I said, could have been a first round pick a few weeks ago in my eyes. I wouldn't touch him. It's terrifying right now.
I'll tell you what, and I kind of alluded to this before we got on. If I'm the Ravens, if I if he's available in like round four, I'll take him.
Yeah.
To have like a kind of generational backup for Lamar, because I think he could fit in that system. Like he could be the puzzle piece in that specific system, but until he proves to me that he can win a game by throwing the football, and obviously the Georgia game this past year kind of doesn't count in my head because Ryan Williams did so much with the ball after he caught it that I would say it's more the Ryan Williams game than it was the Jalen Milrow game. So until he does that, and that's not even a knock on Lamar as he's about to possibly win a third MVP. I'm just saying that that's the only system that I can see Milrow doing anything positive in.
Yeah, it's never good when the guy's not even drafted yet and we're concerned if he's going to be a system QB or not. But
Yeah,
yeah, we had a lot to learn from this Senior Bowl. I would say compared to some of the past years, it was more of a disappointing performance from top to bottom, but definitely another interesting Senior Bowl as always. We're going to stick around throughout the duration of the draft, kind of giving you our breakdown. Pretty soon we're going to have, our big board of our positional rankings. We'll get out some mock drafts once the NFL regular season's over. Obviously, we essentially know what the draft order is going to be, but once the Super Bowl happens this weekend, we'll start kind of getting into mock draft mode, giving you our breakdowns, our talents, our hidden gems. So make sure to stick with us throughout the draft. Obviously, once it happens, we'll give you our reaction to the draft. But yeah, this has been our biggest winners and losers from this week's Senior Bowl. I've been Andrew, as always, joined by Tyler. This is Sideline Signal. So thank you so much for listening. Make sure to like, share, subscribe. Our last two videos have done great, so thank you all for that. Hope you guys enjoy the content that we're putting out outside of our podcast as well. Make sure to follow us on TikTok at Sideline Signal. We've been a little quiet on that lately, but that's just because we were figuring out what's going on with TikTok, and then we'll get back to posting regularly on that as well. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you so much. But other than that, this has been another episode of Sideline Signal. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day.